Well, welcome to the 2008 Franklin Lecture. I'm Tom Marshall. I'm the chair of the Atmospheric and Space Electricity Focus Group. Our focus group instituted the Franklin Lecture in 2004. The lecture is named for Benjamin Franklin, who was one of the first atmospheric and space electricians in North America. He's well known for his many electrical experiments, for inventing the lightning rod, for developing electrical jargon like battery, plus and minus, charging and discharging. Many of the others of you, or people from other communities, probably know Benjamin Franklin better as a signer of the Declaration of Independence and all sorts of things associated with the American Revolution. The first two Franklin lectures were given by Phil Kreider and Donald Gurnett. Today's lecture is going to be presented by Martin Uman. Martin is Distinguished Professor of Electrical and Computer Engineering at the University of Florida. Here is a brief, and I emphasize brief, review of his many accomplishments. He earned bachelor's, master's, and PhD degrees in electrical engineering from Princeton University. He's written over 170 rough-read scientific papers, most of those in the areas of applying electromagnetic field theory to modeling lightning flashes. He's written a number of books, 3 on lightning, 1 on plasma physics. With Vlad Rokov, he wrote a book a few years ago entitled Lightning Physics and Effects, which is the book about all aspects of lightning. This year he published a book titled The Art and Science of Lightning Protection, which I think is available for purchase, or actually I heard it is available for purchase somewhere in the Moscone Center. So check that out. He holds 5 patents, 4 of them in the area of lightning detection and location. In 2001, Martin received the AGU Fleming Medal. He's an AGU Fellow. He's also a Fellow of the IEEE and a Fellow of the American Meteorological Society. In 1988, he was the University of Florida Teacher Scholar of the Year, their highest award. The title of today's lecture is Recent Lightning Experiments. Oh, there it is. Recent Lightning Experiments at the International Center for Lightning Research and Testing, from ball lightning to gamma rays. Please join me in welcoming Martin Uman as this year's Franklin Lecturer.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here. And I didn't know you were going to sell books for me, but that's good also. My goal today is to tell you a little bit about our research facility called the International Center for Lightning Research and Testing, to tell you about the facility and give you a flavor for some of the research. As it says in the title, we have a broad bandwidth. We've been doing research this last summer at least on ball lightning, which is a 1/10 of a hertz phenomena, through gamma rays, which are above 10 to the 20 hertz. So we span 20 orders of magnitude in frequency. The facility is a joint venture between the University of Florida and Florida Institute of Technology. In this slide, I've listed all the faculty in the left-hand column who've contributed to this talk and who make the place work, and the PhD students in the right-hand column. I'm going to try to cover 5 topics. First of all, I want to show you what the place looks like and where it is. And then I'll talk about specific research that we have been doing in the last few years, in fact did last summer. First of all, mechanisms of triggered lightning. Second, attempts to create ball lightning. Third, our long-term project, which is the measurement of close electric and magnetic fields. And finally, the issue of X-rays, gamma rays, and related lightning processes. So let's start with looking at the facility. It's located at an Army National Guard base in north central Florida called Camp Blanding, and sometimes we refer to the place as just Camp Blanding. The military provides airspace in which we can fire rockets to artificially initiate or trigger lightning, and they provide a level of security because we have a lot of equipment spread over a pretty big area, as you'll see. The ICLRT has been in operation since 1993. During that time, we've hosted over 40 researchers from over 30 countries, not counting UF and FIT researchers. So that's why we put international in the title. A perspective view of the site is shown here. North is up. That's 100 meters. The facility is about a 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer facility. At the center is a launch tower where we shoot rockets from. It's one of 3 places, actually, we shoot rockets from, but it'll sort of serve as a reference point. In later slides, we're going to look at the launch tower from the middle of this field and also from down here. The launching is done from this launch control trailer. Photography is done from the office trailer. You'll see some of that photography. We also launch, we have an underground launcher and a ground plane. But the main operation here is a sequence of 24 stations which contain electric field derivative, magnetic field, and X-ray, gamma ray, and cosmic ray sensors. So this is a full station. There are 24 of these. I'll show you that in a minute. The way the system works is all of the 100 measurements in the 24 stations are activated by field bill measurements of electric fields at ground over 2 kV per meter for several minutes. When the system is turned on, if natural lightning occurs in this region, or we shoot rockets and trigger lightning, the optical signal is sensed by optical sensors at either side of the network, and they both have about a 90-degree field of view and look about 100 meters off the ground. So the whole system will be triggered, all 100 measurements, when light is seen near ground or when current is measured in the tower, either way. We've done a lot of experiments. That's what the power lines, for instance, are there, because we've done a lot of triggering lightning to power lines to try to understand how to do better lightning protection of power lines. Let me go to a satellite view of the same place. The ground plane here, 70 by 70 meters, and the launch tower identified in it. Here it is, a view from space. There's the ground plane. Here's the launch tower. So you can sort of get a feel. It's mostly flat, more or less sandy with some pine trees on it. And you can also see the 2 optical detectors at either end. The next satellite view is going to show you where all the sensors are. The red X's are boxes containing 2, and probably by this next summer 3, different kinds of sensors for X-rays, gamma rays, and cosmic rays. The blue sensors measure electric fields and magnetic fields, and embedded in the blue is an 8-station time of arrival network, which operates on the derivative of the electric field and can locate electric field pulses within several meters in the XY plane and within about 10 meters in the vertical plane from maybe 40, 50 meters up to about 500 meters. So it's very accurate at low level, where we're looking to try to understand the bottom end of the lightning. Let's take a couple of views on the ground. This is a view looking north. That's the launch control trailer. And this is our main launch facility. These tubes contain the rockets and shoot them upward. Keep in mind this, we'll talk a little bit more later about this box-shaped structure. If we climb to the top of the tower, we can see PhD student Chris Biaggi loading a rocket. And actually the picture is not to show you Chris, but to show you the rocket. At the bottom, stuck on the bottom of the rocket is a 700-meter spool of copper-covered Kevlar wire. And the rocket takes the spool with it. The bottom of the spool is attached to the rocket tubes, which are above. And from the rocket tubes, the current goes down through measuring devices. Looking from the north-south, this is a typical station, except it doesn't have a magnetic field sensor. There are two flat plate antennas. One's an electric field derivative sensor. All the electronics are underground. The aluminum box over here, which is an 1/8 of an inch thick and light tight and electromagnetically tight, contains two types of X-ray sensors. Lost my little arrow. When the whole system is turned on, when all 100 measurements are turned on, this device here called a PIC controller calibrates everything, measures the battery voltages, measures the temperature in the pits here, and also can change the gains of all the different sensors by way of attenuation. All right, let's move on to talking a little bit about triggered lightning. The way it works roughly is the rocket is launched when the field at ground, when we measure the field at ground at two positions roughly 400 meters apart. When they're about 4 or 5 kilovolts per meter, we have a good chance of triggering. Having a lot of trouble with this mouse. There it is. The rocket goes up at about 200 meters per second. When it gets to 100 or 200 meters, and in the example I'm going to show you after this, it's 172 meters, continuous upward positive leader leaves it because of the enhancement of the electric field at the top of the grounded wire. So that's called the upward positive leader phase. The whole business from about here to here is the initial phase. Once the upward positive leader gets into the cloud charge, initial continuous current flows, and you can have 100 amps to typically 1,000 amps flow for hundreds of milliseconds. During that time, the wire gets heated up and melts, and presumably the material in there goes away, and this is all an air channel eventually. After the initial continuous current ends, the event may be over, about half the time it is, but the other half of the time, the defunct channel, which has no current in it at the time, is traversed by a negative slug of charge called the dart leader that comes out of the negative cloud charge region and propagates down and brings the potential of the cloud down towards the ground, negative potential. When that gets near the ground, an upward leader comes up to meet it because of the electric field at the leader tip, and then the whole process is grounded at the bottom, and a return stroke, which is the bright thing you see, runs back up the channel at about the speed of light and discharges the channel. So what we're going to do is look at some high-speed views after we look at a still picture of how this happens. So here's a 5-second exposure for orientation. Sorry. You're watching a rocket launch now, which I can't stop. But we'll go back now. No, we're going the wrong way. This is a 5-second exposure in which you see the triggering wire has exploded after the upward positive leader has gone into the cloud and enough current has flowed through it. Wind is blowing this to the right, and you can see the luminous vapor, and it's lit up by the initial continuous current. Then it goes out, and there's 3 dart leader coming down with negative charge, return stroke going back up. 3 of those dart leader return stroke sequences. One thing you can notice here is that the tubes are here, but there's an interceptor at the top, and the ICC, initial continuous current, goes down through the tubes, one path to ground, and it turns out in this case we took the return strokes. They hit the interceptor and they take another path to ground. So we separate out the initial continuous current from the return stroke current. Now I'm going to show you a rocket launch. If you watch the top there, this was last September 17th. And this is from the launch trailer about 30 meters from the launch site. There goes the rocket. This is at 20 milliseconds per second. I'll show it to you again. There goes the rocket. This same rocket launch, as viewed from about 400 meters away from the office trailer across the field, is shown here. And I've got these blinding lights in my eyes, so I'm not sure what you can see. But the launch tower is down here. You should be able to see that. And the upward positive leader initiates when the wire gets to about 168 meters. So you'll be able to see when we play this thing, the rocket exhaust going up here, and then you'll see the upward leader, and then you'll see the wire burn up. So let's see if you can see all that. I can't see it. So the upward positive leader has happened, and there goes the wire. After this, the current stops, and there are a number of return strokes, but we're not looking at that. So let's look at this again. See if I can find the... Could you see the rocket go up? Yeah, good. Now, if we examine individual frames in this part of the event, shown in negative, here's the top of the wire, 170 meters or so, and here are consecutive 185 microsecond frames taken with a high-speed photron camera. And you can see the sequential stepping. There's probably several steps in each of these pictures, but you can see the upward leader moving upward into the cloud charge, which is probably 5 kilometers or 5 to 7 kilometers high. So it's a long trip, but it gets there. The velocity of this is fairly constant, at least in the 200 or so meters we looked at it here for these 2 milliseconds at about 6 times 10 to the 4 meters per second. Now let's look at some separate frames from the wire explosion. This is the point where the upward positive leader began. It's 1.8 seconds after the rocket was launched. And 50 milliseconds after that, this little red part here, is this time sequence here. And the current is in the 50 to 100 amp range. At point A, the first spot shows here on the wire. Up to this time, current has flowed all through that time, and the wire is heated up enough that the first spot becomes luminous. Someplace here, I can't see it. B is here, C is here. At point C, the wire is completely lit up. After this happens, a couple hundred milliseconds later, the current goes out, and then there are 8-liter return stroke sequences in this flash. This flash took place last September. And was more information than I'm showing you here in the poster by Jordan Biaggi et al. Yesterday morning. But here is the 20 and 40, there are two 20 microsecond frames preceding the last of the 8 return strokes. These are quite remarkable pictures. If we focus here on a non-inverted picture, this is 40 to 20 microseconds before the return stroke. It's a 20 microsecond exposure. And you can see some part of the leader sticking down here. And here you can see it in a negative view. This turns out to be a dart step leader, which is not a pure dart leader, but has some stepping in it. 20 microseconds to just before the return stroke. This has moved down to here. Looks like that. That's a 25-meter section. And the electric field at the bottom of this has drawn a upward leader from the interceptors at the top of the tower, which here is about 15 meters long. And here is the thing in a negative enhanced view, which shows some amazing structure. You can see corona streamers. You can see a space stem, a bright place here in front of what's a little bit dimmer. It looks like the whole business is already connected up. So the physics of how this happens has never been photographed in lightning. Similar things, similar behavior, maybe similar behavior has been photographed in laboratory sparks. But this is the first picture of this type with this kind of detail of the corona structure during what's called the attachment process. Attempts to create ball lightning. Ball lightning is an orange to a grapefruit size sphere, which has been reported by many people to appear after a lightning occurs. And the curious thing about them is that they are not reported to change luminosity much. They don't rise like they're hot air, and generally don't fall like they're heavy. And they have a duration of a couple seconds, or are reported to have a duration of a few seconds. They go out slowly, just sort of fade away, or have been reported to explode. So they're actually one of the great mysteries in the lightning business, how you can get a glowing ball of something to last for a few seconds. They're also the subject of a lot of nuttiness, and the literature borders on the UFO literature. So people have to be very careful getting into this business. However, we were asked to test as many ball lightning theories, and there are many, as we could, and we tried to do that. In the process, we hit about 100 samples of different materials, and here's a still photograph that gives you an idea how we did this. If you remember that square structure on the side of the tower, we're operating it in the mode now where the additional continuous current, which is hundreds to 1,000 amps or so for hundreds of milliseconds, comes down this path. And in that path, there's a lot of gaps where the lightning arcs over and goes through a whole variety of samples. And the return stroke hits the interceptor, the return strokes, and comes down a different path. So here you can see there's a bunch of other samples. And then we have a high-speed camera on these samples to see how long they last or what they're doing, although you could pretty much tell that with a regular video camera. At the bottom of the return stroke chain, there's a wire which goes into this children's swimming pool of salt water, because in the literature there are a number of reports that claim to be ball lightning where people put arcs underwater and get a glowing, luminous substance rising. The latest paper of that kind was by Versteeg et al., 2008. There were 3 or 4 before that. The Versteeg paper had calcium chloride in the water. We've got salt. You can see the arc to the grounding ring on the side, underwater arc. And there is a glowing mass of material that rises off this that actually lasts about 1/10 of a second. It doesn't last as long as a ball lightning. And that's the same thing it does in the laboratory, although a number of the laboratory papers claim that they're getting a handle on ball lightning. I'm not claiming that at all today, but I'm going to show you our best effort. And in all of the subjects that I'm going to talk about today, I was going to talk a lot longer, but Tom said I could only talk 45 minutes. So I have extra slides that I cut out. So if you want to see some more ball lightning at the end, if there's time, we can do that. All right. So here is the end of an initial continuous current. And during that time, we've released the lightning someplace here. And there's a 1-inch thick piece of stainless steel, which was soaking wet from rain. May have something to do with this. Actually, the steel suffered very little damage. But above it, at the end of the ICC, there's a ball which is shown expanded here. And what I'll do is run this movie. And if you can watch, maybe I'll stop it. If you watch here, you can see the current go out. So you'll know there's no current through the ball. It's been here so far for about 1/3 of a second. It'll last another 1/3 of a second or so. And then a sequence of return strokes go down this other path. You can maybe see the wire from the interceptor down to the other path. But there's no more current through this ball. So let's watch it. And maybe I'll stop it when the channel goes out. Yeah, see the channel is all broken up here. So there's no more current going down this way. But the ball's still there, and there's the expanded version of it. And you can see the stainless steel plate down here. And then we'll play it some more, and you can see it end. And you can also see return strokes going down the other path. Also, the pool of water lit up. Want to see that again? No? Nobody who's ever seen this doesn't want to see it again. Okay, let's see it one more time. So there's no more current on this side. The ball stays there. It's got a fairly sharp outline. It does not rise, or it doesn't rise much. And it breaks into 2 or 3 parts as it goes out. And return strokes come down the other side. Of all the theories we tested, including the most popular ones, for example, silicon nanoparticle webs by Abramson and Dennis, this was unexpected, the stainless steel ball. We actually did the stainless steel in a test of shielding materials for nuclear waste, and it just appeared. So we haven't done it twice. We're waiting to be funded again for next summer to do it twice. All right, that's all I'm going to say about ball lightning unless you ask during a question period. Our main work at the research facility over the years and before we had Camp Blanding has been the measurement of close electric and magnetic fields. And the motivation for that has been an interest in getting statistics on what close fields look like, how big the fields are, how fast they change, and also on modeling the fields to understand how the lightning works, what the current is, how it propagates, how the attachment process to ground works. And those things we're still working on. But just let me show you some fields. And lately we've been tying those fields into the X-ray business, which you'll see also. Before we talk about that, though, I have to say a word or two about natural lightning. We talked about triggered lightning. So I'm going to talk about fields of natural lightning. So let me quickly show maybe the 1% of you there who have not seen this before. Natural lightning, instead of starting at the top of a triggering wire, starts in the cloud, maybe 7 kilometers up. And a process called the stepped leader works its way down, bringing negative charge from the cloud charge towards the ground in the case of the most common kind of lightning, which is negative cloud-to-ground lightning. This stepped leader comes down at about 10 to the 5 meters per second and takes 10 or 20 milliseconds to get from the cloud charge to ground. Each of the steps, and the branching here is caused by separate steps, each of the steps is maybe 50 meters long, and a step occurs every 50 microseconds or so. The steps get shorter near the ground, and the time between them gets shorter. When the leader gets close to the ground, the step leader, the fields are big enough that it causes an upward moving discharge to leave the structure in the same way we just saw with that dart step leader in triggered lightning. And that's initiating the attachment process, whereas the downward leader and the upward leader somehow connect and grounds or puts the bottom of this highly negative potential channel at ground potential, and a ground potential wave runs back up like a wave on a transmission line and discharges the negative charge. That process is called the first stroke in a natural flash. You can see it running up here. After the first stroke is over, 80% of the time there are subsequent strokes, so the first stroke channel goes out, and then a dart leader comes down what's left of the first stroke channel. In the triggered lightning, the dart leader comes down the channel formed by the upward positive leader and the initial continuous current. In the natural lightning, the process starts from the cloud and works its way down. After this point, the natural lightning subsequent strokes appear to be exactly the same or very, very similar to all the strokes in triggered lightning. So here's a dart leader coming down and a return stroke going back. We want to concentrate, or I do anyway, on the very bottom here, because that's where all the interesting new physics is. And to look at how this works and to look at the steps, I've stolen and modified, or my PhD students have modified a picture that's going to be shown in a talk in the next session by Beasley and Jordan. So you should go to that to see what the data really looks like, because we've messed with it. And here's a time-integrated view of the step leader. What we've done here is we've laid every succeeding frame on the previous frame. The total real time from the lightning getting from the top to the bottom is 6 milliseconds, roughly. So you see the steps, or maybe you see a couple of steps in each frame. And then when this one gets to the ground, there's a return stroke. Oh, sorry. This is worth seeing one more time. And then you have to go to the next session and see what it really looks like. Unadulterated. Bang. If you look at the electric fields at various distances from a step leader just before it hits the ground, which we do, and we do this to try to understand the leader and the return stroke. This is at 50 meters. It's not from the discharge you just saw, but 50 meters away. In the last 60 microseconds of the step leader, negative charge is coming down, and you can see these individual leader steps. So every time there's a step there, that's another section being added to the leader. When the attachment process is taking place in here, there's an upward leader, and the return stroke is composed of what's called a slow front and then a fast transition. If you go a little further away, the electric field, say at 350 meters, you don't see those steps anymore. You can see little pulses, radiation pulses, instead of the steps. If you look at the magnetic field at 350, at the bottom here on the same time scale, you can see the current pulses due to the individual steps. And you can also see a process we're going to talk about in a minute that initiates the so-called slow front, which turns into the fast transition, all of which belongs in some way we don't understand really well to the return stroke. There are electric fields here for that same flash at two other distances, and here's the optical signal that triggered the acquisition of this data. So you don't see anything until the return stroke starts, and it looks like that. Looks like someplace between the electric and the magnetic field. That's the light just off the ground. Well, in addition to modeling leaders and return strokes, what we have been doing lately is trying to locate these steps in space and trying to locate the X-rays that go with them. So let me remind you of the 8-station time of arrival network that's embedded within our 24-station network. Howard gave a talk this morning on this network, and I'm going to show a couple of slides from his talk. These are the 8 stations, and the flash we're going to look at, which Joey Howard, who's a PhD student at the University of Florida, talked about this morning, struck right here. It struck a pine tree, killed it. So taking actually not just the electric field step, but the derivative of the electric field step, which has a sharper wave shape, and it's easier to do time of arrival measurements on. Joey Howard has tracked or located the sources of all the step leader steps under about 500 meters, and that's shown on this slide and coded in time here in 100 microsecond intervals as the lightning comes down. So the time of arrival network is accurate to about 5 nanoseconds and very well surveyed in. So the horizontal errors in this, as I said earlier, are a few meters, and the vertical errors are about 10 meters, except very close to the ground. The most interesting thing is going on at the bottom, because nobody's seen this before. And I mean, there are a lot of photographs of step leaders coming down, but nobody has located whatever this is. And so if you look at the bottom of the previous picture, this is from the talk this morning, these are the ends of the leader. The leader's steps make very characteristic wave shapes, so you could identify them. And there were 4 leader branches here. The major leader pulses are used to draw this, and there are minor leader pulses in between. Anyway, underneath these, there's another process, which I showed you the pulse at the start of the fast transition. It's actually a number of pulses, and this is a different flash than that one that I showed you. But there's a process that we call a leader burst. In this one, there were 4 pulses, and the speed at which this traversal takes place is a couple orders of magnitude faster than the step leader speed. And then in the slow front before the fast transition, there are also 2 pulses, and they're located here vertically within 10 horizontal meters of the tree that was killed. So exactly what this really fast process is and what these 2 so-called slow front pulses are, we don't completely understand, but the direction of our research is now to try to understand that. Moving on to X-rays and gamma rays. If we look again at the step leader, here is the electric field, very close. It turns out that with each of those steps, there's a series of X-ray photons emitted practically at the same time. The sensor here is sodium iodide, and this is basically the sensor response. The X-rays all come in very fast. And generally, there is a burst of X-rays each time there's a leader step. And also there are X-rays associated with the processes that we just looked at after the leader. There was a poster given on Monday morning by Ziad Sada from the FIT group, which gave a lot of information about the X-ray measurements. So I'm just barely touching the surface here. In a recent paper this year by Howard et al., the X-ray sources have been located for several events and shown to be very close to the location of the electric field sources of the leader. I think that's all I'll say about that unless there are questions. And now I'm going to go to terrestrial gamma ray flashes. You could hardly go to the poster or oral sessions without hearing about terrestrial gamma ray flashes. And here is an event observed at the ground, which is essentially the same as what's observed on satellites and called terrestrial gamma ray flashes. And we apparently initiated this. We triggered a lightning, and it's an unusual triggered lightning in that the upward leader turned into a current that's 11 kiloamps at one point in the initial continuous current. And when it was 4.5 kiloamps, which is a fairly large current for initial continuous current, down the wire, well, this big pulse, current pulse was coming down the wire, but a sequence of gamma rays hit the ground, it hit the sensors, and there were, I believe, 227 individual photons spread out over about 300 microseconds. I have some other slides on that, but they're shown. This is shown really crunched up here. But the energies go to over 10 MeV, and most of them are between 1 and 10 MeV. The X-rays that come from step leader steps are more like 100 keV. and they all come out at once with the leader step. So this is a completely different phenomenon, and this is extremely very similar to what's seen on the satellites. So we apparently, it starts here when the current at the ground propagating down the wire is at 4.5 kiloamps, reaches its peak intensity in terms of the number and energy of the gamma rays when the current is 11 kiloamps, and then tails off after that. We figure this has to be coming knowing that at this time, when the gamma rays come, the upward leader has been propagating for 40 milliseconds, so it's way into the cloud charge. So we think we triggered something in the cloud charge, and the gammas probably reached the ground at about the same speed as the current wave coming down the wire. If the gammas come from 6 kilometers up, it turns out there's about the same amount of air above 6 kilometers to the satellite height as there is from the 6 kilometers down to the ground. So this should have been observable in a similar form on a satellite. And maybe the argument that everybody makes from energy spectra that the sources of the terrestrial gamma ray flashes are really high up in the cloud or above the cloud aren't all correct. Maybe there are some that take place in or near the bottom of the cloud. That's just a maybe, and probably a lot of people will yell at me for saying that. All right. That actually is going to conclude the formal part of the talk with 1 minute and 26 seconds to go. And here's a very pretty triggered lightning picture without the interceptor there. Thank you very much.
Well, if we had some lights, we would have time for some questions. Question?
I can't see out there. Yeah, we generally call gamma rays anything over 1 MeV, and I mean the different area, different fields put the dividing line different places. But the X-rays that come from the step leader, we call X-rays because they're in the 100 keV range generally. And this gamma ray burst and the one seen on satellites is generally above 1 MeV, up to 20 MeV. But that's, other people define gamma rays different ways. It's a good question.
Tell us more about ball lightning.
Oh, no. Generally, if I give a talk, somebody in the audience has seen it, so like 1 out of 100 people. I'll show you our simulation of the Abramson and Dennis theory. Abramson and Dennis postulated that silicon dioxide gets its oxygen removed by a reaction with something like carbon and then reoxidizes. And that theory, and silicon apparently can form some kind of web, so it could be an oxidizing ball which lasts a while. That theory has gained a lot of popularity, and people in the laboratory, Paeva et al. Notably in 2007, took laboratory arcs and hit silicon and made what they claimed was ball lightning. But Stefan and Massey, 2008, did the same thing, and they say that the remains of these little things that look like they're big balls, they're really just little molten spheres, maybe a millimeter or so in diameter. They look bigger, but a lot of things could be said to be ball lightning. So when ball lightning hits something metal, and this is ball lightning hitting silicon in a repeat of the Paeva and the Massey experiments. So this is lightning into a silicon plate. Actually, it goes through it. And this is one of these time-integrated pictures where we add every frame to the last. So you can see that the things which fall, and I don't know how big your eye would think they were if you were close to them, they have a relatively constant luminosity, but they do fall. And also, if I can get my mouse back, they bounce. And they bounce a lot of places. So this is another, the silicon, probably silicon molten spheres is a very popular laboratory phenomena now, said to be maybe one kind of ball lightning. There may be lots of kinds of ball lightning, because people can see a lot of different things and misinterpret it different ways and misinterpret the duration of it. Okay? You don't want to see any more. You want to see it again? I think actually I've got maybe this is the non-integrated view. No, that's the integrated one. That one shows, this had return strokes and initial continuous current going through it. So when it's all over, it's over now, almost. You can see these little glowing balls. This is from 30 meters away. You can see them falling, and that's what you saw them integrated in the other picture. I think arc welding looks something like this too, but nobody ever said arc welding was ball lightning.
More questions? More ball lightning? If there are more questions, you'll have to speak. Oh. Yes, Bill.
Mark, in your movie earlier of the ball of the stainless plate that persisted after the channel had broken up of the tower, the parts of the channel between where they were broken seemed to last as long as the ball lightning above the stainless plate. Did I see that correctly? And is there any reason to think that the ball lightning part of that was any different than the parts of the channel above?
Yeah, except that it was bigger and had a definite outline and was spherical.
Minimum size for ball lightning.
Well, I'm not claiming to have created ball lightning. I'm just claiming to have tested a lot of theories. And what we don't have is the lightning under control. So we don't know what kind of current we're going to get. And we're just blasting things. I mean, it's fun, but...
Okay, well, since we're now sort of moving into our little break time, I want to thank Martin for his talk. We have a little memento of the talk, and please join me in thanking our speaker.
Thank you very much. That's good.